All right, everybody, let's do this. All right, the assignment was to find a kind of four-directional character, like Link to the Past style, on the asset store. The one we used from class was called Copy Sprite. It's the 2D character astronaut. Let's see what it is. Package manager, 2D character. So it's 2D character astronaut by Copy Sprite. And just first things first, just grab one of the sprites. It honestly doesn't matter which one. I'm just grabbing this sprite because it's the right size, whatever. And we're going to drag it into the scene. So I'm going to go to sprites, and literally any one of these doesn't matter. We're never going to use it. All right, I'm going to drag this one sprite in, put it right in the middle. Boom. Now I have an object in the game, and I'm going to rename that player. All right. And then your player obviously needs the player script. You should have made one in class, but if you didn't, just go ahead and make a player script. And let's get the basics. Okay, I'm going to add the script. All right, first we need a variable for speed. So let's make a public float called speed. Uh, and then we're going to be working a lot with our animator. So we need a variable to reference our animators. So public animator anim. And then to grab the animator, we're going to write anim equals gets component animator. All right, so let's get some basic directional movement. We're just going to use the transform.translate thing that you need built in. So it's transform. Let's do left first. Okay, if the while the player is pressing left, arrow move left. Okay, so it's going to be if of all the inputs, and this one we're going to get key along as it's being pressed. Key code dot left arrow. Okay, so if you're pressing down the left arrow, then transform dot translate. It wants three numbers, X, Y, and Z. We're moving to the left, so it's going to be like negative X. All right, so transform dot translate, three numbers. So it's going to be negative speed because we're moving left. Negative speed times time dot delta time. And then we're not moving up or down when we press left. We're not moving in or out when we press left. So 0 and 0. All right. So if we're pressing the left arrow, move to the left by this, whatever you have your speed set to. All right. And we're going to copy and paste this three times, get the other directions. Okay. Okay. Let's go ahead and make rights. Right arrow, move right. Always add notes to your code. Is really going to kick you in the butt later on if you don't. So if they're pressing down the right arrow, then transform dot positive speed, time the delta time. Okay, when the player is pressing up, move up. Okay. This time, since you're moving up, you're going to move up in the speed times time delta time. So X is going to be 0, but then Y is going to use that speed times time delta time. Change it to up arrow. There you go. And then while the player is pressing down, arrow, move down. Let me just copy and paste this one, so this will work. We're going to go down, negative speed. There you go. And down. All right, I'm going to save this, make sure it works. Right now my speed set to 0, so I'll make my speed 5 or whatever. All right, right, left, up, down. All right, Gucci. All right. So let's make an animator controller. So right click in your project tab, anywhere, it doesn't matter. Animator controller, name it player controller. Don't forget, if you're putting all your different assignments in the same project, then you might have to name it player controller 2 or something like that because it's going to get it mixed up at some point. All right, so your player controller, and we're going to give your player the player controller. So you don't have a slot for it to go in, so you need to go to add components, Animator. Or if you're going from scratch, like nothing's typed in, add components, Where is it? 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 Is it in 2D animation? That's weird. Okay. Add component. Sure. Animator. I can't find it. Animator. Not animation, animator. All right. So we have an animator. Let's drop our player controller in there. And let's start piecing through this logic. All right. So the assignment is to have a four directional character that runs the animations perfectly. Run in all the directions, hit in all the directions, and idle in all the directions. Okay. So let's go to our player controller, animator controller, and let's start dragging some animations in there. All right. So first things first, let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. Here's my entry point. When we start the game off, the player should be facing us, like the actual player. So we're going to have the animation idle down be first. Okay, so animations. Let me just look at it this way. There you go. Idle down. Boom. All right, and we'll drag that in first, so it's the entry point. So it should be the first animation that plays, and we can test it by hitting play in the game. Okay, he's playing the regular down animation. All right, cool. Let me drag my animator over so we can see it a little better. All right, so we got to go from idle down to run down. So let's go run QR run down goes in here. All right, and we also need like some kind of attack down. Um, skiff down, sure. I don't know. Let's find something that looks like an attack. Hammer down better be an attack, right? Whatever. All right, so I have run down and I have hammer down. All right, so I need to program the connections between these. So to go from idle down to run down, let's make a transition. Right click, make transition, boom. All right, let's go ahead and make it both ways. All right, so from idle to run down, click on that, turn exit time off, slide these over like so you don't have the duplicate animation or something that doesn't kick in for a while. All right. And same thing going backwards, back to idle down. All right, so we got to make up our logic here. And to do that, we're going to add animation parameters. All right, so we're going to add four booleans and a trigger. So the first boolean is going to be whether or not you're facing down. And then facing up, facing side, not left and right, facing side. And the reason we're doing it that way is because instead of like having separate animations for left and for right, we have just one for the side. And we're going to use that line of code, that sprite renderer dot flip x thing, to make a switch to the other side. So we know what direction it's facing. We also need whether or not it's walking. So we're going to have is walking. And we're going to have a trigger one. Triggers, they're not like booleans. They just kind of, it's like pressing the button. They're just going to run one time. This is going to be hits. All right, so using our thinking caps from idle down to run down, um, facing down should be true because we're facing down. And then is walking should also be true. All right, so let's try that. Well, no, we gotta do it in code. So to go from idle down to run down, we said that facing down is true, is walking is true. Now from the jump, we're already facing down, like facing towards the player. So I'm just gonna like check facing down so it always starts off turned on. But now we need to make is walking true when the player presses down. Cool. So I'm gonna find the one for down, up arrow down. All right, cool. But we don't want this whenever the player is pressing down, send that message to the animator over and over again. We want to do this one time when it first presses, when the player first presses down, down. Okay. So I'm gonna copy this whole thing. Mm, but this one's gonna say when the player first presses down arrow. Tell the animator. All right. Okay. So this is if input.get key down, when you first press it down. Now, instead of moving it, we're going to erase that. Otherwise, it's just going to move really fast. We are going to tell the animator, anim, to set the Boolean parameter, set bool, dot set bool is is walking equal to true. All right. So now the Boolean variable for walking will be true, and it should work. Okay. What is happening here? Okay, facing down is already true. We're going to add to it is walking is also true. Let's test it out. All right, so I'm going to press down, and it's doing the walk animation, but it's kind of stuck there because we haven't programmed it the other way around. Okay, so again, use your logic here, right? Why would I go back to idle down? Well, because I stopped pressing down. All right, so I'm going to say when I lift up the down arrow key, we're going to say that is walking is false. So I'm going to copy this whole thing again. Uh, when the player lifts up down arrow, tell the animator. So if input.getKey up is walking is false. All right, let's save that and check it. Um, works. Oh, it doesn't work because we did it on the code side, but not the animator like Unity side. Okay. So now I'm going to go to click on the connection between run down and idle right here. All right. And we're going to say, okay, facing down should be true, but is walking should be false, right? So from here in rundown, if facing down is true and walking is false, then it's going to go back to idle down, okay? If these conditions are met, it's going to transition, okay? Down, stop. Cool, perfect. No other direction works because we haven't programmed it yet, but we can go down and stop, and then animation plays perfectly. All right, so now we have to be able to go from idle down to hammer. All right, let's make that transition. Boom, boom. And for this one, it's going to be facing down is true because we're still down. But this next one's going to be, we just call the hit trigger. All right, pretty easy. Let's do the stuff that we always do. Boom. All right. Now let's do this in our code. Now I didn't already have an input if statement, so for the the hit whatever. So we're gonna go ahead and copy this. Actually, copy one that says input.get key down because we want it when we first press the attack button. All right. So when the player first presses space, that's gonna be our attack button. Space, I can't spell. Tell the animator. So if input.get key down key code dot space anim dot set okay anim dot set trigger because this is a trigger not a boolean and it's called hit, and because it's not a boolean we don't need to write true or false, we just write semicolon and we check our code. Cool. I don't know what the heck that is, but that is his hammer down animation that we're going to pretend is a real attack. All right, cool. So hammer down works, but we're kind of stuck there because we didn't make a way back. Not a problem. Make transition. Boom. Okay, so for this one, let's let's try to give it the exit time because if we don't, well, I'll show you. Okay, so if we don't have exit time, let me just show you what happens. So hit. It's just gonna stay there forever. All right, so we need something to make it go over. We can click has exit time, see what happens there. Hit. boom, it goes back to it. Okay. So a hag's exit time is good for when you want something to run through the animation and then immediately go on to the next thing. Okay. It's not like good for like walking, which just runs over and over again, but we definitely want it to, leave after it's done with the attack animation. All right. So we have we can go from idle to hammer and idle to run. Okay, we can prove that here. Idle to hammer, idle to run. Okay, but we can't really go run to hammer. It doesn't work, right? There's no transition for that. We have to make one. Okay, so to go from run down to hammer, we'll make that transition. Okay, no exit time. Okay, so from running, right? To go back to idle walking would be false, right? But we don't care about that with respect to hammer down. With respect to the attack animation, we just want to call the hit trigger. Okay. Notice how I'm doing something, that I'm testing it. That's kind of like the pattern. That's kind of how you code. You do a little something, you test it. You do a little something, you test it. All right. Let's go back to let's check it out. Cool. I went from running to hits. Now, can I go from hit to running? Let's see. Kind of. I'm hitting, and if we click on it here, you'll notice that it'll let me see here. It very, very briefly goes from hammer down to idle to run down. Like if you stare over here, right, it'll go on there very, very briefly. I'll show you. Hit. It's very, very briefly going on there, but it's not visible. So I think I'm okay with it. If it's so quickly that you don't see it at all, that's fine. If it's not, then you got to find a solution. So, anyways, I can go from idle down to run down to hammer. I can go from hammer back to run down. Not directly, but it's so fast that we can't see it, so who cares, right? But we have four directions, right? So let's go ahead and add side, okay? So I'm going to go back to my animations down here. So let's find idle side. Idle side. And let's visually try to make it make sense. Your animator should make some kind of sense visually, so I can throw this exit away. Don't delete it, just put it out the way. Okay. So idle side, from idle down to idle side, um, should technically be impossible, if that makes any sense. Like if you're idle facing down, the only way to face the side is to press to the right and therefore move to the right. But we'll get to that later, okay? So let me add idle side. Let me add run side. Okay. Let me add run side, and let me add, what was this, hammer down? Hammer side. Hammer side. All right. So uh, we have to go from idle down to run side. Now, how do you press that? You hit the right arrow key or whatever it is, right? Which is going to make you run forward. Let's see if we can do it this way. So from idle down to idle side, okay. What's going to be the condition? Well, it's going to be that facing side is true. All right. Facing side is true. There you go. So now we got to program that. So it's going to be the right arrow key. So let's go to the right arrow. And let's make another one for when you're pressing down the right arrow. When the player first presses right arrow, tell the animator. Okay, so get key down is when you first press it down. And then instead what we're going to do is tell the animator that's facing side is true, right? Now here's the complication, right? We need to tell it that you're not facing the other side, if that makes any sense. We could have, for the animator, instead of using booleans for facing up, down, and facing side, we could have just used like an integer one and made one left, two right, or three, up, four down. But we didn't do it that way in class. So we're not doing that way here. Anyways, I don't want the animator to get confused, right? So I want to make sure that when I turn facing side true, that I turn facing down false. And dot set bool is false, all right? And we're doing this again because, oh, let me get rid of that. We're doing this because from the animator's perspective, right? If you're here, you have options of where to go, right? If they hit the hit button, you'll go down here, right? If they hit the down arrow, you go down here, right? If facing side becomes true, we'll go this way, right? You want to make it sure so that exactly one of these options is true at a time. So we're going to make it a point to turn the other sides off, okay? So facing side is true, facing down is false, right? Okay, let's check it out. Ooh. So I went to the side, but it didn't go to the right side, which is actually something I wanted to show you on purpose. But let's finish getting run working. Okay. So from idle side, let's make that transition. Okay. And you're gonna make facing side still true, right? But now is walking is true. Okay. And we'll do that in code. We first press the right arrow. This is good. This is good. Let's go ahead and add is walking is true. Right. Okay, let's see if it goes. All right, cool. So it's going to the walk straight from the idle. It's really quick, you can't see it. But obviously it's going the wrong way, so we gotta fix that, right? So to fix that, we have to do basically this, right? We have to go inside the sprite renderer. It's the thing that represents the sprite. Like if I turn it off, boom, you can't see yourself, right? It is the sprite part of this player game object, right? So we want to use that dot flip x thing to turn it the other way. Okay, x and y, but we're just gonna do x. All right, cool. So we're gonna do basically this in code. All right, no problem. So when we press down the right arrow, we need to also flip the sprites. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, first we need a variable to reference the sprite renderer. Okay, so public sprite renderer sprite ren. Okay, and then we're going to run a get component to grab it. Sprite ren equals gets components. All right. Now, when we first flip the sprite, we should be able to see it on the other side. There's something sprite ren dot flip x, lowercase f, capital X, equals true. So I'm gonna flip the sprite. All right, let's test it. Cool. Now he's facing the right way. Now he doesn't go. He doesn't flip back over. You're gonna have to say when you press down the left key, sprite ren dot flip x equals false, and then it'll flip back the other way. And then obviously you have to program him to go back to idle. You got to program the attack, and then you have to do all this stuff for kind of facing up as well. So that should be it. A couple of pointers. Um, when you're designing your animator, make it make sense. I'm kind of doing, you know, this kind of is off in the middle of nowhere, but I'm coming into idle down, and then I'm putting my idle side on the side over here. And the same way idle down branches into hammer down, run down, idle side branches to hammer side, run side. And I imagine if I want it to make sense, I would put idle up, kind of up here somewhere, and make them branch out from there. There's no necessarily wrong way to do it, but again, you typically make stuff with groups of people, right? And you don't need people looking at your stuff like, what the heck is this? Also, when these get really, really complicated, you'll be glad that you had them structured correctly, or you'll be really sad that you didn't. So try to make the structure of your animation, your animated controller make sense in some kind of visual way. Um, and just follow your logic. If it's not working, look in the inspector, check these things, check what it is over here, check what it says down here when you click on different stuff. Make sure you click on your player to see the player in the animated controller. And I think that's it. Okay. Okay. All four sides. Facing side is the same thing. You just gotta run that sprite render.flipx thing. Run, attack, and idle. All right. And I'm gonna show you how to make animation events for your explosions as well. All right, the other thing I wanted you to learn was how to do an animation event. All right, so first things first, let's download a particle effect. All right, window, asset store. Let's find a cool particle effect. Hmm, let's go explosion. What is happening here? There you go. Explosion. Explosions. All right, explosion. There you go. Why is it bringing up nothing? This isn't good. Okay, let's find a free cartoon explosion. What? This looks great. Cartoon FX remaster free. Exactly what I'm looking for. Cool. All right. Open Unity. Now, I didn't look much at it because I think I've seen this asset before, but one of the things you want to look for, okay, I don't want all this. All right. In a package is just to make sure it has what you're looking for. But I'm pretty sure I've used this one before. Okay. JMO assets, cartoon effects, remaster, sure. Prefabs, and I want a cool little lightning. No, an explosion. Yes. When my player hits something. So let's check them out. You can go to find their prefabs folder and just find something and go to it, go to your scene. You can typically hit play to see what they look like. Oh, perfect. That is the greatest 2D explosion I've ever seen before, right? So I'm going to make my guy basically cause an explosion whenever he attacks, right? All right, cool. What was that called? CFXR explosion? Done. All right, CFXR explosion. All right, let's go to our player scripts again. And towards the bottom, it's going to be between your last two brackets because we don't want this to go in the update loop. I'm actually going to close this out. Um, we want it to go just before the update loop, like still inside the script, right? So I'm going to make a function called void explode. Sure. Okay. Boom. Let's make it public because we need the animator to read it. Public void explode. All right, and all it's going to do is spawn that explosion. So spawn the explosion. This is something trainer will probably teach you, but you're going to call instantiates. Instantiates. We need a variable to store this, so I'll call it XPL, and I'll make it later, EXPL. Um, and we're going to spawn it at this position. Okay. All right, so we don't have this variable here yet, so we got to make it. So let's go up top. Let's make a public game object, a public game object called that. Alrighty. So now you see the player script. There's a blank slot for that EXPL. Go ahead and drag your explosion in there. All right. So we have a function. That's what this is. It's public void that makes an explosion happen on the position of the player. And the purpose of an animation event is to sync up basically the calling of a function with an animation, right? So almost terrible, hit hammer down. We want the explosion to come out when he hits. All right, so let's look for hammer down again. It's going to be copy sprue, animations, hammer down. Okay, I double click on the animation to bring up the animation window. All right, so you can drop this arrow down and kind of see a little better. All right, so that's my animation for hammer down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little bookmark here, right, to add an animation event. Sorry, if you highlight it, hover over it, excuse me, it'll say add event. I'm going to click that. Boom. All right. Now, when I click on that event, right here, boom. Okay, so object, it's going to be the object you're on, if it asks you that. So the object for this event is going to be this player, right? Oh, why isn't that dragging in? There it is. Ooh, that's not good. Oh, it's going to be the player script? Maybe. Player script. Boom. All right. So the player script, so any object that has the player script, and it just wants the name of the function. So the name of the function is explode. Okay, I think you get the parentheses. I'm not even sure off the top of my head. So yeah, so at this point in the animation, it's going to call the function explode on the player script. So let's see if it works. Boom! There you go. That was awesome. I don't know what was wrong with it before, but when I clicked on it, I just kind of selected it again. Okay, now what if I want it to happen a little bit earlier? Well, that's not hard at all. All right, you go back to your animation for the player, right? You go to animation for the player. I go to hammer down, which is the animation we're doing, and that's the animation event, that little tab right there. Okay, I can move it forward. Let's try it again. Okay, we hit space. Boom, it goes forward, okay? So I want your attack to have spawn some kind of particle effect. I don't care if it's cool or not, or if it looks perfect. This is just a thing to make sure that you understand animation events. All right, that's it. Okay. All four directions working. Run, idle, and hits. And on your hit, I want to see an explosion come out via an animation event. And that's it. All right, I'll see you in a couple of days.